The letter trembled in Rebecca Turner's hand, its sharp edges threatening to slice more than just the calloused pad of her thumb. Standing in the doorway of her family's home in Seligman, Arizona Territory, 1885, she stared at her father's handwriting, dark and slashing across the page like the cuts of a whip. "You are no longer welcome in this house. Your willful disobedience has brought shame upon this family." Rebecca folded the letter carefully, tucking it into the pocket of her simple cotton dress. 3 days ago, she had refused to marry Albert Wickham, the banker's son, a man twice her age with cold eyes and heavy hands. 3 days ago, her father had locked her in her room like a criminal. Today, she had escaped through the window with nothing but a small satchel of belongings, only to find this letter nailed to the front door. At 20 years old, Rebecca had never been alone. The vastness of the Arizona desert stretched before her, beautiful and merciless. The late afternoon sun beat down on her auburn hair as she stood at the crossroads, one path leading back to town, the other winding toward the open range. "Miss, you all right?" The voice startled her from behind. Rebecca turned to face a man astride a chestnut stallion. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the concern in his eyes. "I'm fine," she lied, squaring her shoulders. The man dismounted in one fluid motion. He was taller than she had initially thought, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. His eyes, she now saw, were a startling shade of blue against his weathered face. "Pardon my forwardness, but you don't look fine." He kept a respectful distance. "Name's Hank Lawson. I run the Double L Ranch about 10 miles west of here." Rebecca hesitated. In Seligman, everyone knew everyone's business, yet she'd never met this rancher. "Rebecca Turner," she finally said. "You headed somewhere, Miss Turner?" His eyes flickered to her small bag, the truth caught in her throat. "Away," she finally said. "Just away." Hank nodded slowly, his expression revealing no judgment. "I see." He paused, then continued. "It's getting late. Not safe for a lady to be walking alone. If you need a ride to wherever away might be, I'd be happy to oblige." Rebecca studied him. Her father had taught her to distrust strangers, especially men. But her father had also arranged for her to marry a man who made her skin crawl whenever he looked at her. What choice did she have now? "I don't actually know where I'm going," she admitted, hating the tremor in her voice. "I just can't stay here." Something shifted in Hank's expression. Recognition, perhaps. He removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair streaked with hints of copper from the sun. "Miss Turner, I don't mean to pry, but are you in some kind of trouble?" She laughed bitterly. "Only the trouble that comes with having a mind of my own." Instead of the dismissive response she expected, Hank's face softened. "That's not trouble at all in my book, that's character." He replaced his hat. "Look, I'm headed back to my ranch. My sister Martha lives with me. She's been looking for help with the housekeeping and cooking. If you need work and a place to stay until you sort things out, I can offer you that." Rebecca blinked, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "Why would you help a stranger?" "Because someone once helped me when I was standing at a crossroads." He shrugged. "And because your choice matters to me." "My choice?" "Whatever brought you here with nothing but that bag, it was your choice to make, not mine to question." Tears threatened, and Rebecca blinked them back. She hadn't cried when her father had told her about the marriage arrangement. She hadn't cried when her mother had helped her into the white dress they'd selected without her input. She hadn't even cried when she'd climbed out of her bedroom window, knowing she might never see her family again. But this stranger's simple respect for her autonomy nearly broke her. "I refuse to marry a man I didn't love," she said quietly. "My family has disowned me for it." Hank nodded, no surprise registering on his face. "Then they're fools, Miss Turner. A woman's heart isn't property to be traded." He gestured to his horse. My offer stands. No strings attached. If you'd prefer I take you to town instead, or even the next settlement over, I'll do that. Rebecca looked back toward Seligman. The sun was beginning to set, painting the adobe buildings in hues of orange and gold. It was beautiful, and it was no longer her home. I accept your offer of employment, Mr. Lawson, she said formally, gathering her dignity. If your sister approves, of course. A smile broke across his face, transforming his serious features. Martha's been complaining about my cooking for years. She'll be downright celebratory. He extended a hand to help her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. As they rode away from Seligman, Rebecca felt the weight of her old life begin to lift. She didn't know what awaited her at the Double L Ranch, but for the first time in years, the decision had been hers to make. The Double L Ranch sprawled across the land like a living thing, nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance. As they approached, Rebecca could make out a main house larger than she expected, several outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse some distance away. A creek wound through the property, its banks lined with cottonwoods that glowed golden in the setting sun. It's beautiful, she murmured. Been in my family for 20 years, Hank said, pride evident in his voice. My father built it from nothing. When he passed 5 years ago, Martha and I kept it going. As they rode into the yard, a woman emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 30, with the same striking blue eyes as Hank, though her hair was lighter, pulled back in a practical bun. You're late for supper, she called, then stopped short at the sight of Rebecca. Oh, I didn't realize you were bringing company. Hank dismounted and helped Rebecca down. Martha, this is Miss Rebecca Turner. Miss Turner, my sister Martha Lawson. Martha's eyes widened slightly, taking in Rebecca's small satchel and travel-worn appearance, but her smile was warm. Welcome to the Double L, Miss Turner. Hank explained the situation briefly, careful to maintain Rebecca's privacy while conveying her need for employment. Martha's expression softened. Well, you're most welcome here, she said firmly. We've been needing help, and I'd be grateful for another woman's company. The Cowboys are good men, but their conversation tends to revolve around cattle and horses. Rebecca felt a rush of relief. Thank you, Miss Lawson. I'm a hard worker. Martha, please, she corrected with a smile. Come inside. You must be hungry and exhausted. The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly refined. Polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture, and shelves lined with books spoke of prosperity and education. Rebecca had grown up in comfort as the daughter of Seligman's most prominent merchant, but she had expected a ranch to be more rustic. It was our mother's influence, Martha explained, noticing Rebecca's surprise. She was from Boston originally, insisted on bringing a bit of civilization with her. Martha showed Rebecca to a small but pleasant bedroom at the back of the house. It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you need it. It's perfect, Rebecca said honestly. The simple room with its iron bedstead, patchwork quilt, and view of the mountains felt like a sanctuary. Over a supper of beef stew and fresh bread, Rebecca learned more about her new employers. The Double L ran 500 head of cattle and employed 8 cowboys who lived in the bunkhouse. Hank handled the ranch operations while Martha managed the household and finances. Where did you learn to cook? Martha asked as Rebecca complimented the meal. My mother taught me, Rebecca replied, a pang of homesickness surprising her. And our housekeeper, Mrs. Finch. Your family in Seligman. They're merchants, Hank asked carefully. Rebecca nodded. My father owns Turner's General Store. She hesitated, then added, I won't be welcome there anymore, if that causes problems for you in town. We don't answer to Seligman society, Martha said firmly, and we do most of our business in Prescott anyway. That night, Lying in her new bed, Rebecca felt the weight of her decision fully for the first time. She had abandoned everything familiar: her family, her home, her position in society. For what? The promise of freedom, the right to choose her own husband or to choose no husband at all. Sleep eluded her, and she found herself walking quietly through the dark house and out onto the porch. The night air was cool, the sky ablaze with stars in a way she'd never appreciated in town. "Can't sleep," Hank's voice came from the shadows. He sat in a rocking chair, a half-whittled piece of wood in his hands. "Too much thinking," she admitted, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Thinking has kept me up many a night." He gestured to the empty chair beside him. Rebecca sat, finding the rhythmic motion of the rocker soothing. "Do you regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Bringing a strange woman home based on nothing but a story that might not even be true?" Hank considered her question seriously. "I'm a decent judge of character, Miss Turner. Had to survive out here. You're running from something, but you're not running from the law or your own misdeeds." He paused. "Am I wrong?" "No," she admitted, "but I'm still a stranger, not for long." He continued his whittling, the soft scrape of his knife against the wood oddly comforting. "Everyone deserves a second chance, a fresh start." "Is that what you had? A second chance?" The rocking stopped for a moment. "Yes," he said finally. "After the war, I came west with nothing but nightmares and guilt. Found myself at a crossroads not unlike where I found you today." "What happened?" "A rancher and his wife took me in. Gave me work purpose. Later, they helped me buy this land when they decided to move back east." He resumed rocking. "I wouldn't be here if not for their kindness. Sometimes passing it forward is the only proper thanks." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the night alive with the sounds of crickets and distant coyotes. "What are you making?" Rebecca finally asked, nodding toward the wood in his hands. Hank held it up the beginning of a small horse. "I whittle when I can't sleep. Not very good at it, but it keeps my hands busy." "It's lovely," she said, admiring the emerging shape. He handed it to her. "It's yours, then. A welcome gift." Rebecca accepted it, touched by the simple gesture. "Thank you. Get some sleep, Miss Turner. Tomorrow's a new day." As she returned to her room, Rebecca felt something she hadn't expected to find so soon: a tentative peace. The wooden horse clutched in her hand seemed to represent something important, though she couldn't quite name it yet. Perhaps, she thought as sleep finally began to claim her, it was hope. Life at the Double L quickly fell into a rhythm that Rebecca found both challenging and rewarding. She rose before dawn each morning to help Martha prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. The Cowboys were respectful, if curious, about the new addition to the household. Rebecca learned their names: Joe, the weathered foreman; Miguel and his brother Louis from Mexico; Ben, barely older than Rebecca herself; Henry, the oldest at nearly 60, and 3 others who came and went with the seasons. Martha proved to be not only an employer but a friend. She taught Rebecca the particulars of running a ranch household, everything from preserving food for winter to treating minor injuries and illnesses. "You're a quick learner," Martha remarked one afternoon as they worked together making soap. "Most city girls would be complaining about the work by now." Rebecca smiled. "I've always liked being useful at home." She paused, realizing she no longer thought of her parents' house as home. "In Seligman, my father considered too much housework beneath our station." My mother agreed. "But I used to sneak into the kitchen to help our cook." "Rebel from the start," Martha teased. "I suppose I was," Rebecca said thoughtfully. "I just never saw the sense in rules that existed only to maintain appearances." Martha nodded approvingly. "You'll do well out here then." The West doesn't much care for appearances. 2 weeks after her arrival, Rebecca rode into Prescott with Hank to purchase supplies. She had been nervous about venturing into town, afraid of running into someone who might recognize her, but Prescott was large enough that she felt anonymous in its busy streets. Hank was different in town, more alert, less relaxed than he was on the ranch. He moved with purpose, checking items off Martha's extensive list with efficiency. Rebecca found herself watching him, noticing the way people deferred to him, the mix of respect and caution in their greetings. "You're well known here," she observed as they loaded supplies into the wagon. "Been coming to Prescott since I was a boy," he replied. "My father did business here. They seem to respect you." Something flashed in his eyes, not quite discomfort, but awareness. "I had some trouble here once, settled it fair and square. People remember that sort of thing." Before she could ask more, a commotion down the street caught their attention. A crowd had gathered around two men locked in a heated argument. "Stay with the wagon," Hank instructed, striding toward the disturbance. Rebecca watched as he inserted himself between the two men, one elderly, one young and wild-eyed with drink. With a few quiet words and a firm hand on the younger man's shoulder, Hank diffused the situation. The crowd dispersed, disappointment evident in their postures at being denied the entertainment of a fight. "That was impressive," she said when he returned. "How did you calm them down so quickly?" Hank shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just reminded them they'd both feel foolish in the morning if they came to blows over a card game." On their way back to the ranch, they stopped by a creek to rest the horses. The Arizona summer was in full force, the heat shimmering over the landscape. Rebecca dipped her handkerchief in the cool water and pressed it to her face, sighing with relief. "May I ask you something, Mr. Lawson?" she said, emboldened by the day's events. "Hank," he corrected for perhaps the 10th time, "and you can ask me anything. Why aren't you married?" "Martha told me you're 33. Most men your age out here have families by now." If the question surprised him, he didn't show it. He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair before replacing it. "I was engaged once, after the war." Caroline was a schoolteacher from Philadelphia who came west to teach in Prescott. The simple past tense told Rebecca all she needed to know. "I'm sorry. Influenza," he said simply. "Winter of '76. Took a third of the town, including Caroline. That's terrible." It was. His eyes were distant. "After that, the ranch became my life. Martha needed me, and I needed the work to keep my mind occupied." He looked at her. "What about you? Besides the man your father chose, was there someone else? Someone you wanted to marry?" Rebecca shook her head. "No. There was a boy once when I was 16, Thomas Williams. We used to meet secretly in the orchard behind my house, but his family moved to California." "First love," Hank said with a small smile. "Powerful thing." It didn't feel powerful. It felt unfinished. Rebecca plucked a wildflower from beside the creek. "I think that's why I couldn't marry Albert Wickham. Not just because he was cold and controlling, but because I wanted the chance to feel something real, something complete." Hank was watching her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "That's worth waiting for," he said finally. The moment stretched between them, filled with something unspoken. Then one of the horses whinnied, breaking the spell. "We should get back," Hank said, standing and offering her a hand up. "Martha will be wondering where we are." As they continued their journey, Rebecca found herself stealing glances at Hank's profile. The strength in his jawline, the tiny scar above his right eyebrow, the way the corners of his eyes crinkled when he smiled, all details she hadn't noticed before today. By the time they reached the Double L, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land. Martha came out to meet them, her face tight with worry. "What's wrong?" Hank asked immediately. "Riders came by while you were gone, looking for Rebecca." Rebecca's heart stuttered. "My father." "No," Martha said. Albert Wickham and 2 men with him said they were looking for his intended who'd been led astray. Hank's expression darkened. What did you tell them? That I had no idea what they were talking about, of course. But Hank, they didn't believe me. They said they'd be back with the sheriff. Rebecca felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She hadn't considered that Albert might come after her. In her mind, refusing him had been the end of it. Can they do that? She asked, her voice small. Force me to go back? No, Hank said firmly. You're a grown woman. They have no legal right to you. But if my father told them I stole something, or did you? Of course not. Then they have no grounds, Hank assured her, but she could see the concern in his eyes. Still, we should be prepared. Martha, Rebecca stays with one of us at all times. I'll talk to Joe and the boys, make sure they know to keep an eye out for visitors. That night, Rebecca barely slept. Every creak of the house, every distant sound made her heart race. Near dawn, she gave up and went to the kitchen to start breakfast early. To her surprise, Hank was already there, coffee brewing on the stove. You too? He asked, pouring her a cup. Rebecca accepted it gratefully. I keep thinking about what will happen if they come back. I won't let them take you, Hank said simply. Not unless it's what you want. It isn't, she said quickly. But I don't want to cause trouble for you and Martha. You've been so kind, and now I've brought my problems to your doorstep. Hank leaned against the counter, studying her over the rim of his coffee cup. Rebecca, he said, using her first name for the first time, you aren't causing trouble. Wickham is. There's a difference. The way he said her name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. Still, I could leave, go somewhere else further away. Running isn't always the answer, Hank said gently. Sometimes you have to stand your ground, even when you're afraid, especially then. He set down his cup. Courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about doing what's right despite it. Rebecca looked up at him, really looked, and saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Hank reached out, his fingers barely brushing hers on the kitchen table. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. It hasn't felt basic in my experience, she admitted. A shadow crossed his face. Then the men in your life have failed you. I won't do the same. Martha entered the kitchen then, eyebrows rising at finding them already awake and talking. The moment passed, but Rebecca carried the warmth of it with her throughout the day. 3 days later, the riders returned. Rebecca was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She froze, the wet sheet still in her hands, as 4 men rode into view. Albert Wickham led them, his portly figure awkward in the saddle. Behind him rode the Seligman sheriff and 2 men she didn't recognize. Martha appeared at her side, taking the sheet from her numb fingers. Go inside, she said quietly. Find Hank. But it was too late. Albert had spotted her. Rebecca, he called, his voice carrying across the yard. There you are, my dear. Your father and I have been terribly worried. Rebecca stood her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Mr. Wickham, she acknowledged coldly. I left a letter explaining my decision. There was no need for worry. Albert dismounted, approaching with what he clearly thought was a conciliatory smile. Up close, Rebecca could see the anger simmering beneath his polite facade. A decision made in haste and confusion, he said, reaching for her hand. Rebecca stepped back. A decision made with complete clarity. The sheriff dismounted as well. Miss Turner, he said, tipping his hat, your father reported you missing, said you might have been coerced to leave. The only coercion was his, Rebecca replied, her voice steadier than she felt. I left of my own free will rather than marry a man I do not love. Albert's smile tightened. Rebecca, you're overwrought. These people have clearly influenced you against your family's wishes. Your father has no right to dictate my future, Rebecca interrupted. I am 20 years old, Sheriff. Not a child to be ordered about. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. That may be, miss, but if you took anything belonging to your father, she didn't. Hank's voice cut through the tension as he strode across the yard, Joe and Miguel flanking him. Miss Turner came with nothing but her own possessions. Albert's eyes narrowed. And who might you be, Hank Lawson? This is my ranch. Recognition flashed in Albert's eyes. Lawson, I've heard of you. Confederate deserter, weren't you? Hank didn't flinch. I served with the 4th Texas Infantry until Appomattox. Then I came home. The sheriff cleared his throat. Mr. Wickham, if the lady says she left voluntarily and took nothing that wasn't hers, there's no crime here. She's promised to me, Albert insisted, color rising in his face. Her father and I had an agreement. I made no such promise, Rebecca said firmly, and I am not property to be traded in an agreement between men. Martha stepped forward. Sheriff, my brother and I have employed Miss Turner as our housekeeper. She's here legally and by choice. Unless you have a warrant, I don't, the sheriff admitted. Then I believe we're done here, Hank said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Albert wasn't ready to concede. He turned to Rebecca, his expression darkening. Your father won't take you back, you know, not after this humiliation. You've ruined your reputation. No decent man will have you now. Rebecca lifted her chin. Then I'll make my own way. With him, Albert sneered, gesturing at Hank. Do you think he wants you for your housekeeping skills? A pretty girl alone on a ranch full of men, everyone knows what that means. Hank moved so quickly that Rebecca barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he had Albert by the collar, lifting him almost off his feet. You owe the lady an apology, he said, his voice dangerously soft. The sheriff stepped forward. Lawson, it's all right, Sheriff, Albert said, his bravado faltering. Just a misunderstanding. No need for things to get uncivilized. To Rebecca he managed a stiff nod. My apologies, Miss Turner, that was uncalled for. Hank released him, and Albert stumbled back, straightening his jacket with as much dignity as he could muster. I think you gentlemen should leave now, Martha said firmly. The sheriff looked relieved. Yes, well. Miss Turner, if you ever need assistance, I know where to find you, Rebecca finished for him. Thank you, Sheriff. As the men mounted their horses, Albert couldn't resist a parting shot. This isn't over, Rebecca. A woman needs protection in this world. You'll realize that soon enough. They watched in silence as the riders disappeared down the road. Only when they were out of sight did Rebecca allow herself to tremble. Are you all right? Hank asked, his voice gentle once more. Yes, she said, though her knees felt weak. Thank you for standing up for me. We all did, he said, including Martha, Joe, and Miguel with a glance. Family sticks together, Martha said simply, squeezing Rebecca's hand. Family. The word resonated in Rebecca's chest. In 3 weeks, these people had shown her more loyalty than her blood relations had in years. Will they come back? She asked. Hank's expression was grim. Wickham might. Men like that don't like being denied what they think is theirs. I'm not his, Rebecca said fiercely. No, Hank agreed, his eyes meeting hers. You're not anyone's but your own. That night, the ranch hands insisted on staying closer to the main house, setting up a rotation for keeping watch. Rebecca tried to protest that such measures weren't necessary, but Joe, the foreman, wouldn't hear of it. It's not just for you, Miss Turner, he explained. It's for Martha, too. We protect our own here at the Double L. As summer gave way to fall, Rebecca settled deeper into life at the ranch. The incident with Albert and the sheriff faded into memory as days passed with no further visit. She wrote to her younger sister, Catherine, sending the letter care of Catherine's friend to avoid their parents' interference. The reply, when it came, was both comforting and heartbreaking. "Mother and father forbid us to speak your name," Catherine wrote, "but I miss you terribly. Father has arranged for me to marry Thomas Blackwell next spring. He is kind enough, and I do not object as you did. Still, I admire your courage, sister. Write to me when you can." Rebecca shared the letter with Martha, who hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry about your parents," she said, "but glad your sister still cares for you." "It's more than I expected," Rebecca admitted. "And at least Thomas seems decent, unlike Albert." "Speaking of Albert," Martha said carefully, "you should know there are rumors in town about you and Hank." Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind Albert hinted at when he was here, that you're more than Hank's employee." "Oh." Rebecca didn't know what to say. The truth was, her feelings for Hank had grown complicated. She admired him, certainly, found him attractive, undeniably. But there had been no impropriety between them. "I don't believe the rumors matter much out here," Martha continued, watching Rebecca's face closely, "but they might if you ever decide to return to town life." "I'm not planning to," Rebecca said honestly. "This is my home now." She hesitated. "Unless. Does it bother you, the rumors?" Martha laughed. "Heavens, no. People have been gossiping about the Lawsons since my father first staked a claim here. Besides," she added with a knowing smile, "I've seen the way my brother looks at you when he thinks no one's watching." Rebecca's heart skipped. "Martha, just an observation," Martha said innocently. "And perhaps a suggestion that if certain rumors were to become truth, I wouldn't object in the slightest." Rebecca's relationship with Hank had evolved into a deep friendship. They often sat on the porch after supper, talking about books he was surprisingly well read, politics they disagreed amicably, and their pasts shared in careful, measured doses. She learned that he'd lost his mother at 12, that he'd fought at Gettysburg and still had nightmares about it, that he could play the fiddle but only knew 3 songs. In turn, she told him about growing up as a merchant's daughter, about her love of drawing, a hobby her father had discouraged as impractical, about her dream of someday seeing the ocean. But they never spoke about the growing tension between them, the way their hands sometimes brushed accidentally on purpose, the lingering glances, the conversations that trailed into comfortable silence, loaded with unspoken words. One October evening, Rebecca was returning from the chicken coop with a basket of eggs when she heard the sound of a fiddle coming from the barn. Curious, she followed the music. The barn door stood partially open, and through the gap, she could see Hank sitting on a hay bale, eyes closed, playing a slow, mournful tune she didn't recognize. She stood watching, transfixed by the unexpected grace in his strong hands as they coaxed music from the instrument. When the song ended, she couldn't help applauding softly. Hank's eyes flew open. "Rebecca, I didn't know anyone was listening." "I'm sorry for intruding," she said, entering the barn. "That was beautiful." He looked embarrassed. "Just something my father used to play." "You told me you only knew 3 songs," she teased, setting down her basket and sitting beside him on the hay bale. "This makes 4. I've been practicing." He ran his fingers along the fiddle's neck. "I thought, maybe for the harvest dance next month." Rebecca smiled. Each year, the ranches in the area held a dance to celebrate the end of harvest. Martha had been talking about it for weeks. "You're playing at the dance." "No, but I thought." He hesitated, then met her eyes directly. "I thought you might like to go with me." Rebecca's breath caught. "As your employee," Hank set the fiddle down carefully. "No," he said quietly, "not as my employee." "As what then?" she pressed, her heart pounding. Hank reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "As whatever you want to be, Rebecca. Your choice matters to me." The words he'd spoken to her that first day echoed between them, taking on new meaning. Rebecca leaned into his touch. "I choose to go with you," she whispered. "As your partner, your equal." Hank's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and Rebecca answered by sliding her arms around his neck, drawing him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Hank rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for months," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" she asked, her fingers playing with the hair at the nape of his neck. "I needed to be sure you were staying because you wanted to, not because you had nowhere else to go." Rebecca pulled back slightly to look into his eyes. "I'm staying because this is where I belong. With you, with Martha, with this life we're building." Hank kissed her again, more urgently this time, until the sound of the dinner bell made them both jump. They looked at each other and laughed, the joy of their newfound understanding making them giddy. "Martha will be wondering where we are," Rebecca said, standing reluctantly. Hank kept hold of her hand. "Rebecca," he said, suddenly serious, "I want to court you properly. No rushing, no pressure. And if the time comes when you want more marriage, family, I want that too, but only if it's your choice. Always your choice." Rebecca felt tears prick at her eyes. "Hank Lawson," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I believe I'm falling in love with you." His eyes widened, then crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Well," he said softly, "that's fortunate, because I know for certain I'm in love with you." The harvest dance was held in a large barn belonging to the Peterson family, whose ranch bordered the Double L to the east. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the gathered ranchers, cowboys, and townspeople. A small band played lively tunes, and tables groaned under the weight of food brought by the ranchers' wives and daughters. Rebecca wore a dress Martha had helped her make, deep blue calico with white trim, more fashionable than anything she'd worn since leaving Seligman. Her hair was arranged in an elegant knot, with a few curls framing her face. "You look beautiful," Hank whispered as they entered the barn. He was handsomer than ever in his best shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed. Martha had ridden ahead with Joe, ostensibly to help with preparations, but Rebecca suspected she wanted to give them time alone. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions as Rebecca and Hank navigated the shift from friendship to courtship. The dance was in full swing when they arrived. Rebecca knew many of the attendees, now neighboring ranchers who'd come to accept her as part of the Double L, wives who exchanged recipes and quilting patterns with Martha, cowboys who tipped their hats respectfully when they passed her in town. "Miss Turner, Mr. Lawson, Mrs. Peterson bustled over to greet them. "So glad you could come. And together, too," she added with a meaningful smile that told Rebecca the rumors Martha had mentioned had indeed spread far and wide. Hank took it in stride, his hand warm on the small of Rebecca's back. "Mrs. Peterson, the decorations are lovely. You've outdone yourself." They moved through the crowd, stopping to chat with friends and neighbors. Rebecca was introducing Hank to the new schoolteacher when she felt him tense beside her. Following his gaze, she saw why. Albert Wickham had just entered the barn, accompanied by a severe-looking woman she didn't recognize. "What's he doing here?" Hank muttered. "The Petersons probably invited him," Rebecca said, her stomach tightening. "He does business with most of the ranches." Albert spotted them and, after a moment's hesitation, headed their way, the woman following. Rebecca felt Hank's arm slip protectively around her waist. "Miss Turner, Mr. Lawson," Albert said stiffly when he reached them. "May I present my wife, Mrs. Eleanor Wickham?" "Wife?" Rebecca blinked in surprise. "Mrs. Wickham," she managed, "a pleasure to meet you." Eleanor Wickham was perhaps 35, with sharp features and shrewd eyes that assessed Rebecca coolly. "Miss Turner," she said, I've heard so much about you. Rebecca forced a smile. All good things, I hope. Hardly, Elinor said with unexpected frankness, but I find I must thank you nonetheless. Thank me, Rebecca was confused, for refusing to marry my husband. Elinor's lips curved in a small, private smile. Had you accepted him, I would still be languishing in Philadelphia, waiting for a suitable match. Albert looked distinctly uncomfortable. Elinor, perhaps we should— Oh, do be quiet, Albert, his wife said without heat. Miss Turner and I deserve this moment of understanding. To Rebecca, she continued, my father and Albert arranged our marriage 3 weeks after you departed, a business merger essentially. I had no more choice in the matter than you did. Rebecca didn't know what to say. I'm sorry, she offered finally. Elinor's eyebrows rose. Don't be. Unlike you, I had no objection to the arrangement. Albert's business acumen serves my father's interests, and his companionship is preferable to spinsterhood. Her gaze flicked to Hank, then back to Rebecca. Though I see you found a more romantic alternative. Before Rebecca could respond, the band struck up a waltz. Hank seized the opportunity. If you'll excuse us, he said, nodding to the Wickhams, I believe I promised Miss Turner this dance. He led her onto the dance floor, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. Are you all right? He asked as they began to move to the music. Yes, Rebecca said, surprised to find it was true. Actually, I'm relieved. If Albert is married, he can't possibly still harbor designs on me. Hank relaxed slightly. That's true. He guided her through a turn, his steps sure and graceful. Though I don't envy his wife. Did you hear how she spoke about their marriage, like a business transaction? For many women, marriage is exactly that, Rebecca said. A necessary security in a world that offers few options for independence. Hank's eyes softened. Is that what you're seeking now? Independence. Rebecca considered the question as they moved across the floor. I wanted independence from being told whom to love, she said finally, but I've discovered something important in these past months. What's that? True independence isn't about being alone. It's about having the freedom to choose who to share your life with. She met his gaze steadily. I choose you, Hank Lawson, not because I need security or protection, but because I love you. Hank missed a step, then recovered, pulling her closer than propriety strictly allowed. Rebecca Turner, he said, his voice rough with emotion, will you marry me? Not today, not tomorrow, but when you're ready. Joy bubbled up inside her, as bright and unstoppable as a desert spring. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. They continued dancing, wrapped in their private happiness, unaware of the approving glances and knowing smiles around them. Martha caught Rebecca's eye from where she stood with Mrs. Peterson, raising a questioning eyebrow. Rebecca's radiant smile was answer enough. Martha pressed a hand to her heart, her own face breaking into a wide grin. Later, as they stood under the stars waiting for Martha to join them for the ride home, Hank pulled Rebecca into his arms. When? He asked simply. Spring, she decided. When the wildflowers bloom on the ridge. He nodded, kissing her forehead. Spring it is. Winter descended on the Arizona territory with unexpected ferocity that year. December brought snow that lingered on the mountains and frosted the valley. The ranch work continued. Cattle needed tending regardless of weather, but the cold drew the household closer together in the evenings, gathered around the fireplace. Rebecca wrote to Catherine with news of her engagement, receiving an enthusiastic response despite their parents' continuing disapproval. Father forbade me to attend your wedding, Catherine wrote, but I shall find a way. Your happiness means more to me than his anger. As Christmas approached, Rebecca threw herself into preparations, determined to make the holiday special. She and Martha decorated the house with pine boughs and red ribbons, baked cookies from Martha's mother's recipes, and secretly worked on gifts for everyone on the ranch. For Hank, Rebecca embroidered handkerchiefs with his initials and painted a small watercolor of the view from the ridge where they often rode together. It wasn't much, but she hoped he would understand the sentiment behind it. On Christmas Eve, after a festive dinner with the ranch hands, Hank asked Rebecca to join him for a walk despite the cold. Bundled in coats and scarves, they strolled through the starlit night, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "I have something for you," Hank said when they reached a small clearing where a solitary pine tree stood. "I couldn't wait until morning." From his pocket, he withdrew a small box wrapped in brown paper. Rebecca opened it with trembling fingers to find a delicate gold ring set with a small sapphire that matched the blue of her dress from the harvest dance. "It was my mother's," Hank explained. "My father gave it to her when they decided to come west together." Rebecca slipped it onto her finger, tears threatening despite her smile. "It's perfect," she whispered. "I have something else, too." From inside his coat, he produced a folded document. "Martha and I talked. We want to make it official." Rebecca unfolded the paper and read by the light of the lantern Hank held. It was a deed, transferring 1/3 ownership of the Double L Ranch to Rebecca Turner. "Hank, I can't accept this," she protested. "The ranch is your family's legacy." "And you're my family now," he said simply. "You and Martha. The ranch should belong to all of us." Rebecca looked at him, this man who understood better than anyone the importance of choice and independence. "Thank you," she said, knowing the words were inadequate for what she felt. "For everything." "Merry Christmas, Rebecca," he said, drawing her close. "Merry Christmas, Hank," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. Winter slowly released its grip on the land, and by March, hints of green were appearing in the valley. Rebecca and Martha were busy with wedding preparations, while Hank expanded the main house, adding 2 new rooms in anticipation of their future together. One afternoon, Rebecca was in town with Martha when a familiar figure stepped out of the general store. Her mother, Elizabeth Turner, looking older and more tired than Rebecca remembered. "Mother." Rebecca stopped short, her heart racing. Elizabeth Turner froze, her eyes widening in recognition. For a moment, Rebecca thought she might turn away. Instead, she clutched her parcels tighter and said, "Rebecca, you look well." "I am well," Rebecca replied, acutely aware of Martha hovering protectively nearby. "Very well, in fact." "Mother, this is Martha Lawson, my friend and soon to be my sister-in-law." Elizabeth acknowledged Martha with a stiff nod. "Your father mentioned you had found employment." "I found much more than that," Rebecca said. "I'm engaged to be married to Hank Lawson, Martha's brother. He owns the Double L Ranch." Something flickered in Elizabeth's eyes, surprise, perhaps even a hint of approval. "I see, and you're happy with this arrangement." "It's not an arrangement, Mother. It's a choice we made together. And yes, I'm happier than I've ever been." Elizabeth seemed to struggle with herself before saying, "Your sister asks about you constantly. She's married now." "I know, we write to each other." Rebecca hesitated, then added, "You and Father could write to me too, or visit. You'd be welcome at the Double L." Her mother's expression closed. "Your father wouldn't hear of it. He considers you dead to us." The words stung despite Rebecca's expectation of them. "And what do you consider me, Mother?" For the first time, Elizabeth's composure cracked. "My daughter," she said softly. "Always my daughter." Rebecca felt tears threaten. "Then act like it," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Come to my wedding. Meet the man I love. Be part of my life again." "I can't defy your father," Elizabeth said, but uncertainty had crept into her tone. "You can make your own choice," Rebecca told her, "just as I did." Elizabeth looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I must go. Your father will be waiting." She paused, then added, "When is the wedding?" April 15th, Rebecca said, hope fluttering in her chest. At the ranch. 2 o'clock. Elizabeth nodded once sharply, then turned and walked away without another word. Martha squeezed Rebecca's hand. "Do you think she'll come?" "I don't know," Rebecca admitted, "but I had to try." The day of the wedding dawned clear and perfect, the desert in full bloom just as Rebecca had hoped. The ceremony would take place on the ridge overlooking the ranch, where wildflowers carpeted the ground in a riot of colors. Martha helped Rebecca dress in a gown they'd ordered from a dressmaker in Prescott ivory satin with lace at the collar and cuffs. Simple but elegant. Her hair was arranged with white flowers, and she wore her mother's pearl earrings, the only possession she'd taken from her old life that held any sentimental value. "You look beautiful," Martha said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "My brother won't know what hit him." Rebecca laughed, but her eyes kept straying to the window, watching the road for any sign of her family. Catherine had written promising to attend despite their father's prohibition, but there had been no word from her mother since their chance meeting in town. Guests began arriving, neighboring ranchers and their families, the Cowboys dressed in their Sunday best, friends from Prescott. Joe, now the ranch foreman, would stand up with Hank, while Martha would be Rebecca's attendant. As the appointed time drew near, Martha gently urged Rebecca toward the door. "It's time," she said. "Hank will be waiting." They were just leaving the house when the sound of approaching horses made them pause. Rebecca's heart leapt as a buggy came into view, driven by a young man she recognized as Catherine's husband, Thomas. Beside him sat Catherine herself, waving excitedly. And in the back seat, looking nervous but determined, was Elizabeth Turner. "Mother," Rebecca breathed. She came. Catherine rushed to embrace her sister while Thomas helped Elizabeth from the buggy. "Rebecca," her mother said formally, then her composure slipped and she pulled her daughter into a tight hug. "My dear girl." "You came," Rebecca said, tears threatening to ruin the careful application of rouge Martha had insisted on. "Your words stayed with me," Elizabeth admitted. "About making my own choice." She straightened, composing herself. "Your father doesn't know. He thinks we're visiting Thomas's aunt in Flagstaff." Rebecca laughed through her tears. "A rebellious streak. I knew you had it in you." Elizabeth managed a small smile. "Perhaps you inherited it from me after all." She looked around at the ranch, taking in the well-maintained buildings, the prosperous appearance. "This is where you've been living." "This is my home," Rebecca confirmed. "Come, I want you to meet Hank before the ceremony." The ceremony itself was simple and heartfelt. Standing before the minister, with the valley spread out below them, and the sky an endless blue above, Rebecca and Hank exchanged vows they had written themselves. "Rebecca," Hank said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes, "when I found you at that crossroads, I didn't know I was also finding my future. You have brought light and joy to my life in ways I never thought possible. I promise to honor your choices, to stand beside you as your equal, to love you through whatever challenges we may face. This is my solemn vow." Rebecca blinked back tears as she responded. "Hank, you offered me shelter when I had nowhere to go, but more importantly, you offered me respect when I had been denied it. You truly saw me when others tried to make me invisible. I promise to be your partner in all things, to face life's adventures by your side, to love you with all that I am for all of my days. This is my solemn vow." As they exchanged rings, Rebecca was acutely aware of her mother watching, of Catherine beaming beside her, of Martha wiping away tears. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Hank leaned down to kiss her, Rebecca felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food prepared by Martha and the neighboring women. The cowboys had cleared the barn floor for dancing, and music filled the air as the sun began to set. During a quiet moment, Elizabeth sought out Rebecca. "Your husband seems like a good man," she said, watching as Hank chatted amiably with Thomas. "The best man I've ever known," Rebecca agreed. Elizabeth hesitated, then said, "I brought something for you." From her reticule, she withdrew a small package. "It belonged to your grandmother." Rebecca unwrapped the package to find a delicate silver locket. Inside was a tiny portrait of a young Elizabeth holding an infant Rebecca. "Mother," she whispered, deeply touched. "I want you to have it," Elizabeth said, "and I want to be part of your life if you'll allow it. I've missed you, Rebecca." Rebecca closed her hand around the locket. "I've missed you too, and yes, I want you in my life." "All of you, Catherine, even Father if he ever forgives me. He's a proud man," Elizabeth said, "but perhaps in time." She squeezed Rebecca's hand. "Be happy, my daughter. That's all I ever truly wanted for you." Later, as the night deepened and the celebration showed no signs of winding down, Hank drew Rebecca away from the crowd. They walked hand in hand to a quiet spot beneath the cottonwoods where they had first kissed months ago. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely, Mr. Lawson," she replied, tilting her face up for his kiss. "And you?" "I never knew it was possible to be this happy," he admitted. "Having you, Martha, this land, our friends, it's more than I ever dreamed of." Rebecca leaned against him, content in his embrace. "It's just the beginning," she said. "We have our whole lives ahead of us." "A lifetime of choices," Hank agreed. "Together." 5 years later, Rebecca stood on the porch of the Double L, watching as 2 riders approached. Beside her, 3-year-old James tugged at her skirt while baby Elizabeth slept in her arms. "Is that them, Mama?" James asked, bouncing with excitement. "Yes, sweetheart," Rebecca confirmed. "That's your grandma and Aunt Catherine." The visitors had become an annual tradition, Elizabeth Turner making the journey from Seligman each spring, usually accompanied by Catherine and often Catherine's children as well. This year was special, though. This year, there was a 3rd rider with them. Rebecca felt Hank's presence before he spoke, his arm sliding around her waist. "Is that who I think it is?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said, her heart beating faster. "My father." After 5 years of estrangement, Harold Turner had finally agreed to visit the Double L. His letters over the past year had grown gradually less formal, more personal, until finally he had asked if he might accompany Elizabeth and Catherine on their visit. Rebecca watched as the riders drew closer, anxiety and hope warring within her. So much had changed. She had changed from the frightened young woman who had fled her father's house to this confident rancher's wife, mother of 2, part owner of a thriving enterprise. Would he see that? Would he finally understand? "Nervous?" Hank asked, always attuned to her emotions. "A little," she admitted. "It's been so long." "Whatever happens," he assured her, "you have a family here who loves you." Rebecca looked at her husband, still handsome, still kind, still her rock after all these years, and their 2 beautiful children. Beyond them was the ranch house, expanded now to accommodate their growing family and the thriving operation they had built together. Martha had married Joe 3 years ago and lived in a new house just down the hill, expecting their first child. "I know," she said, leaning into Hank's strength. "And that makes all the difference." As the riders reached the yard, Rebecca handed baby Elizabeth to Hank and descended the porch steps. James ran ahead, eager to greet his grandmother and aunt. Harold Turner dismounted slowly, looking older than Rebecca remembered. He stood awkwardly as Elizabeth and Catherine embraced Rebecca, then stepped forward when they moved aside. "Rebecca," he said formally, "you look well." "Father," she replied, suddenly unsure what to do with her hands. He glanced past her to where Hank stood on the porch with the children, then back to her face. "Your mother says you're happy here." "Very happy," Rebecca confirmed. Harold nodded as if confirming something to himself. "I was wrong," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "About Wickham. About what was best for you." He gestured at the ranch, the house, her family. This was clearly the right choice. Rebecca felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thank you for saying that." Harold cleared his throat. "I've been a fool, a proud old fool. Can you forgive me, daughter?" Instead of answering, Rebecca stepped forward and embraced her father for the first time in 5 years. After a moment's hesitation, his arms came around her, holding her as they had when she was a child. "Welcome to our home, Father," she said when they finally separated. "Come meet your grandchildren." Later that evening, with the children asleep and their guests settled in the newly added guest rooms, Rebecca and Hank sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge. "Your father seems to be coming around," Hank observed, his arm draped comfortably around her shoulders. "It will take time," Rebecca said, "but yes, I think he is. He actually asked me to show him the ranch operations tomorrow, said he was interested in my investment." Hank chuckled. "Progress indeed." Rebecca leaned her head against his shoulder, content in the peaceful night. "Did you ever imagine, that day you found me at the crossroads, that we'd end up here?" "Not in the details," Hank admitted, "but I knew there was something special about you from the first moment. A strength that matched the vulnerability." "I wasn't strong," Rebecca protested. "I was terrified." "Being afraid and being strong aren't mutually exclusive," Hank pointed out. "Courage is about acting despite fear, remember?" Rebecca smiled, remembering their conversation from years ago. "You taught me that. And you've lived it every day since," he countered, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Running a ranch, becoming a mother, rebuilding your relationship with your family, all of it takes courage." Rebecca considered this. "I suppose it does." "Know what else takes courage?" Hank asked, a hint of mischief in his voice. "What?" "Agreeing to have a third child." Rebecca sat up, looking at him in surprise. "Hank Lawson, are you saying you want another baby? Elizabeth is only 6 months old." He grinned, the same boyish grin that still made her heart skip. "Not right away, but someday. This house has room for more Lawsons, don't you think?" Rebecca laughed, settling back against him. "Let's see how my father's visit goes first, one challenge at a time." "Fair enough." Hank's arms tightened around her. "We have all the time in the world." As the night deepened around them, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the desperate young woman fleeing an unwanted marriage to the confident wife, mother, and rancher she had become. The road hadn't always been easy, but every step had been her choice. And that, she knew now, made all the difference.